When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadabji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 60. Since childhood, she lived with uncertainty, from psychological abuse to sexual abuse. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Candace Ali. Candace is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Trauma Resource Network Incorporated. She has combined experience of 17 plus years in the nonprofit sector as well as being self-employed. In prior years, Candace owned an online fashion mall and as a business and leadership development coach. She has served her last 9 years in the role of an executive board member for Magnolia Place Homeowners Association. Candace also serves on her county's Consumer and Family Advisory Committee and has organized and led multiple community events in Orange County since moving to Hillsborough, North Carolina in 2010 from Caldwell County, North Carolina, where she was born and raised. When asked, Candace often refers to herself as a human doing rather than a human being, because she is always trying to do something to pay it forward in some way for others. Candace is actively involved at the local, state, and national level for peer supporters across the country. She believes wholeheartedly that people with lived experiences who are willing to admit to and work through their struggles will always be valuable to the treatment team model. Candace is a firm believer that bonds are formed through shared experiences that peers can convey in a professional setting while still creating and maintaining boundaries. Well, hello, Candace. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Thank you, Salima. Thank you for having me here today.
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad that you're here. Candace, I'm so delighted to have you on the show today and am truly humbled by your acceptance to be a guest on the show. You know, I'm really grateful for your willingness to be able to tell your story. I have mentioned previously, and, you know, I continue to be invigorated as I chat with guests like you who really allow me to draw on their vigor and support and inspiration with all the storytelling that I get to bear witness. It's truly inspiring. It's just amazing for me. And it's really important that together we take a stance to help break barriers of mental stigma.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Candace, you know, in case you're still wondering, this podcast is all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether it's directly about a mental health struggle or something else. One thing that we really know about people, about individuals, is that No matter what their story is about, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way that remains tucked away. So, in creating this platform, its intention is to serve in a way to break the barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So, together today, my hopeful mission is that you and I can stand tall and encourage people to share and tell what individuals typically have reservations for expressing. And of course, I'm bringing forward a trend. It's called the mental beauty rethink. Candace, tell me, what's the first thing that pops into your mind when you hear this phrase, the mental beauty rethink?
To me, it just means that we as individuals can change the way we think and the way we see things sometimes to move to a more positive lifestyle for ourselves and our families.
I like it. We can change the way we think, and that helps us to change the way we see things. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, that's been my experience, at least.
hmm Yeah. And breaking down the barriers, right? So sometimes we talk with people about how physical health and mental health are treated or seen in silos, but they're really one whole part of a person and it's complementary. And when someone's physical health is well or impacted, there could be a domino effect on the mental health and vice versa. They really do work well with each other. And it's important for us to be able to see them as equals.
Absolutely. I agree. I
Yeah.
know for me, physical health, mental health, all of that led to what I feel like was part of my struggle with addiction. And so I completely agree with you. It's so important that we consider and think about our overall health and not just different pieces of it.
Yes. Yes. Overall health versus different paces. Absolutely. That's an important message. So, Candace, I'm eager to start our deeper chat. I hope you are too.
For sure.
I'm really looking forward to uncovering your story today. So let's do this. Okay. Candace, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. What would it say?
My title would say Mother Moves from Mental Health and Addiction Struggles to Thriving in Her Life.
Okay, I'm going to try seeing if I got that. Mother moves from mental health and addiction struggles to thriving in her life.
Yes,
Okay. So, without giving away your story just yet, do you think you could tease us with what this title means to you?
absolutely. I've faced a lot of mental health struggles and addiction struggles in my life.
hmm
And today I practice self care and all of that. And I am able to maintain my sobriety one day at a time.
hmm Amazing. Okay, well, then let's segue right into your untold story. Tell us what your untold story is all about.
Thank you. At 14 years old, I felt so hopeless, so helpless. I was far away from my family and felt there was no way out besides suicide. And I
Mm-hmm.
attempted suicide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was left feeling very alone and not knowing where to turn or where to seek help.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very hard. And that journey led me to being in a psychiatric unit through Halloween of that particular year.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very scary experience as a 14-year-old child to be sitting in a psychiatric unit, clueless as to what I had actually done to get me there. Because I think as children, we don't realize the consequences to our actions as much. And unfortunately, I didn't have a mom to guide me in the way and to better understand the reactions to my actions and consequences to those type things. So I was kind of navigating life as best I could myself, and it just felt like there was no other way out for me.
Okay, right. So I'm curious. It seems like for 14-year-old Candace to feel so hopeless and alone to get to the point of attempting suicide, I'm curious about what growing up was like before 14. What sort of things did you experience?
At 6 years old, I was molested in a drug house with my mom. And at around 9 years old, I began to be molested by my grandfather, who was a well known pastor in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 10 years old, my mom was so into drugs and her partying lifestyle that I was just sent to stay with my aunt, my grandmother, anyone that would take me into their home for the night and give me shelter and protection so I could sleep and get up and go to school the next day is kind
Mm-hmm.
of how I lived my life.
Mm-hmm.
Very grateful for my family that did take me in, but it really created an unstable lifestyle and an unstable home environment for me. And those are some of the things I feel like that led up to that feeling just so hopeless for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, there was a lot of instability, as you said, right? And not just instability. I mean, it sounds like it was pretty horrific to I can't imagine what a 6-year-old must have been feeling and experiencing. You're still developing yourself to be sexually molested that way at 6 and 9. Someone who's supposed to be a family member that you're meant to love and connect with, especially when there must have been some role confusion, right? Like you talk about your grandfather being a well-known pastor in your community, and then to be experiencing this in secret. It must have been heart-wrenching for you.
Oh, absolutely. And at that age, I knew something wasn't right about it.
Right, so you knew something didn't feel good, but you weren't really sure what it all meant.
Exactly. And I knew that I
Mm,
loved my grandma so much that I
mhm,
didn't want her to experience the hurt, or I didn't want to be rejected by her because she was the only person I had in my life. So I just kept my mouth shut and didn't say anything to anybody because I didn't want to hurt anybody else.
mm. So it's almost like you were feeling like you needed to protect the adults.
Yes,
Wow,
absolutely.
right. And you kind of adopted that at such a young age, feeling that you have to be the parent to nurture and take care of everyone's feelings.
Yes. And I think some of that also came from my mom being so irresponsible as a mother.
Mhm,
I also felt like I had to protect her because there would be times I would come in from my aunt's. I remember one time she was under our kitchen table, and I remember the police saying, had I not came in and found her, she would have been dead in another couple hours. And my uncle had actually beat her almost to death, and her friends, quote unquote, had turned her over on her side and left her under the table and just left that night when they were finished partying. And then I was left to go in the next morning and find her before I could get ready to go to school.
wow. That must have been devastating.
It was, I still have nightmares about it.
Mhm. So I'm curious, what happened when you were about 14? Because you said that at 14 you were far from your family. So did something happen for you to not be with your family anymore?
So at 13, I was going to be inducted into Beta Club for school because I always felt like I had to perform and do my best to get any attention from my mom. And my mom couldn't even make time to go to that because it was her birthday and she wanted to party for her birthday. And she got upset with me because I was upset because she was already drunk when I came home. And it just hurt me so bad because I just wanted that time and attention from her. I just wanted to make her proud. And I
Mm.
felt like no matter what I did or how hard I tried, I couldn't do enough for her. And she actually ripped my dress that I had planned to wear that night, just trying to fight me like I was doing something wrong. And my grandmother come and got me. And that's when my dad finally said, this is too much. My dad had tried for several years to get me out of that situation. But back in that particular time, custody wasn't taken from the mother very
Right.
easily. So
Right.
my dad finally stood up and said, look, regardless of what the norm is, I'm getting my child out of this. And he did. And then I moved to Texas with my dad.
Okay. So when you went to Texas, that's when you started to feel alone because you're now in a completely new environment away from anything that you were familiar with.
Absolutely. And my dad, being a single father, having no support from my mother, and us being so far away from his family, our family, and everything. My dad was working night shift. So I was going to school during the day. My dad was working at night. So again,
Mm.
I was left pretty much alone to do for myself. And it was very difficult.
Mm. And so, while you might have felt more safe and stability probably looked different, there was still instability that showed up in a different way. You had now a father who was responsible, but not really quite available.
Right.
When you were experiencing those things in hindsight, could you tell the difference? Could you feel safer? I guess I'm curious about if you felt safer and felt like it was healthier where you were, despite feeling more alone and hopeless. If you had those thoughts, I'm wondering how they must have been competing with each other.
I absolutely felt more safe and like I had a home that wouldn't be jerked out from under me. It was comforting to know that I would be able to go sleep in the same bed each night, and it may not be on my aunt's floor or at my grandma's house, or just really never knowing what the evening would bring after I left
Right.
school,
Hmm.
and living with my mom, to having that stability with my dad. But I had formed such close relationships with my grandmother and my aunt where I didn't have my mom, that I just missed them so bad. And then, of course, I didn't have friends in Texas when I first moved there. It was like reestablishing life all over again.
Hmm.
But it did feel much safer. It just felt like no matter what, I couldn't see my family because obviously it was 18 hours away.
Yeah, it's far.
Yeah.
Right.
But at 14, it's like I just didn't have the concept of money, I guess. And I was like, well, why can't dad just put me on a plane and send me home, and I want to go home? So the things in my mind were definitely conflicting and things, but I did feel much safer.
Hmm. Right. And not understanding the limitations of being able to fly or being put on a plane or still having to do things independently or trying to figure out how do I make sense of these surroundings? Who do I connect with as friends? Those must have been all very competing demands, even just thinking about it in your mind.
Absolutely. It was very hard.
And so, what happened after 14, right? So, we talk a bit about your childhood and some of the really complex traumas that you've been through and where it led you at 14. What happened next?
So I started dating a guy older than me. And then my dad found out I was dating him. And I felt like I had let my dad down at that point. And like there was no other way to deal with it other than to just escape it. I attempted to commit suicide when I went to school. And that morning I tried to speak with my counselor and the crisis counselor, and nobody was available. And it
Mhm.
just felt so hopeless. I attempted to commit suicide at school that day. And
Mhm.
the last thing I remember was being sent to my Spanish class. I remember the teacher asking me if I was okay. And I remember jolting up out of my seat. And I guess I collapsed in the floor. And then when I woke up about 2 weeks later, I was in Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas.
Wow. So you were not awake for 2 weeks?
That is correct. I was in ICU and was completely non responsive for a couple weeks. I vaguely remember my stepmom just telling me to squeeze my dad's hand, and I tried with all I could. And I remember them yelling for the nurses that I had brain activity. And it was still several more days from what I was told before I woke up. But I guess that's when they knew, at least my dad knew, that hopefully I would be okay and would wake up from it.
Right. Okay. So that's how that began.
Mm-hmm.
So, Candace, in a private conversation that we had, you mentioned that you found yourself in a pretty tough situation at 17. Do you feel comfortable talking about that today?
Absolutely. When I was 17, I was in a forced sexual situation. It was the first and only time I'd ever been with that particular person. And I became pregnant. I gave birth and have an amazing son that came from that situation.
Mm.
But it was very, very hard as a 17-year-old to be put in a situation where I had to make very tough decisions. Did I want to go on to college, and did I want to give my child up for adoption? You know, there were just all these options I was faced with at 17 that I feel like I was in no position to be making those kind of decisions. I didn't receive a lot of guidance as a child, and not that maybe anybody knows the right answer, so to speak, but was just, I was left once again to figure it out on my own, and I did. So here we are today, but that was definitely another devastating time in my life for sure.
Were there any other experiences that you had after that?
When I was 19, I had a stillborn daughter. And so we did have to bury her. I then had my youngest son at 21 and continued to struggle with addictions and mental health issues through my 20s. Luckily for me, in my later 20s, I met my now husband, who has been extremely supportive of me. And through losing my grandmother and all the hard things that have come in life since then, just having someone to be there and to support me that I feel like isn't going to leave me.
So, sorry, I'm just so curious. Was that your first marriage or your only marriage, your current husband?
This is actually my second marriage.
Your second marriage.
My first husband was a crack cocaine addict, and my addiction actually started with crack cocaine while my first husband was in rehab. And I told my mom, I said, Mom, I just want to know why I'm losing everything I've worked so hard to have in life. And instead of telling me, oh, you don't want to know because there's nothing positive about it, she handed me my first hit of crack cocaine. And that's where, I'm not blaming anyone, but that's where I believe that my addiction struggles really began, was because, you know, it was just handed to me, and then she knew how to make it, and she wasn't shy to show that she knew how. And so it was just an environment that I found myself in that was unhealthy yet again. Then finally we separated and divorced. And then my mom got into a better relationship and was traveling with my stepfather. And I'd actually gone to visit her. And that's actually how I met my current husband.
I see. So there was still that downward spiral that you had before meeting your husband.
Yes.
What a journey that has been. So when you met your current husband, did you know something was different?
Absolutely. So when we first met, he was very reserved and very quiet. And I'm a pretty outgoing person. So I was just talking, and I shared about my kids, and I shared how we are a package deal and it's all of us or none of us. And he didn't run. And I was like, okay, that's really weird. Most men run when they hear women have children, or that's the experience that I had seen with my friends and things, or that's what it appeared like. But he didn't run. And so I knew he was different in some way. And I
Mhm.
asked him, I said, why would you even want to talk to me or be with me? And he said, because I see the potential in you. And that was the
Mhm.
first time, I guess, outside my grandmother, my dad, my aunt, the people that tried to encourage me, my family, the first time anybody had ever really said that to me. I had been presented with opportunities and done things and performed in jobs when I wasn't in active addiction, so to speak. But
Mhm.
it was the first time it really resonated with me
Yeah.
that I'm capable of doing things to help people and things to make a difference, hopefully, in someone's life. And over time, I just began to believe that, I guess, because he's stuck with me all this time. And so it started to make a believer out of me.
That's so beautiful. And it sounds like when I hear you tell me all of these things about how your husband now at the time telling you that he saw this potential in you and it sparked this ability for you to feel capable of doing good things and contributing to the lives of other people and making a difference and amplifying the belief in yourself and becoming that believer. It also sounds like for the first time in a long time that someone on the outside see you truly for who you were. That must have been so validating for someone to truly get you, to see you for who you really were and what you were worth and what you really truly had to offer.
Yes, I think that's a perfect way to put it, actually, because, with my first husband, I felt like no matter what I did, it was never good enough or right enough, much like the feeling
With your mom.
I had lived with my mom. Yeah, yeah.
You had that feeling with your mom too, when you said that no matter what you did, you were not able to impress her. Like you wanted to make your mother proud and you couldn't no matter what would happen or what you would try to do. That is so interesting that that theme followed you, but the pattern broke here. That must have felt like victory.
It did, and it
Yeah.
has, and it does. And just to know that I have someone that believes in me and has stood by me through thick and thin just really means a lot to me. And it means
Hmm.
the world to me. And we actually got married in 2018. We'd been together for 8 years. Yeah, I'm really excited and very grateful that he came into my life and has chosen to stay in my life because it's definitely been impactful for me personally.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it sounds like you went full circle from such devastation from childhood, such instability, such exposure. And here you are finding yourself, finding your path, finding your way, finding your people. And all of that was allowing you to create space to become who you are today. It's quite beautiful. It really is. And so, Candace, when people come to see me for therapy, people are typically in one of three places. Some people are getting started where they might be in a hot mess, or they just have a whole bunch of different things going on in their life, or different things that have been part of different chapters, and they need to make sense of it and start somewhere. Some people are in the middle and they need to navigate through maybe something particular or need support. And some people are looking back with this idea to get closure on a part of their life or looking back in reflection and looking to gain insight and looking at things from what they can take forward to the next part of their life. So, what part of the journey would you say that you are in? Would you say that you're getting started, in the middle, or looking back?
For me, I think I'm to the point that I'm looking back.
Hmm.
I feel like I waited for me till I was at a point in my recovery where I knew that I could talk about these things. I knew that I could put myself in situations that may be tough or hard, and that I have the confidence that I can say no.
Mm.
What I mean by that is I would continue my relationship with my mom knowing that it was unhealthy for me
Hmm.
and feeling like the only way I could relate to her was to use with her.
Hmm.
And I finally got to the point where I'm like, that's not doing me any good. It's not serving my family. It's not serving my home.
Mm-hmm.
And so I make the choice to not use, and she can make the choice whether she still continues to come around me,
Right.
even though I choose not to use.
Mm-hmm. It really sounds like you found a way to really integrate your emotions and integrate your experiences, because it sounds like you were able to get to the place of, being able to talk about things without necessarily being triggered in the same way, and being able to face tough situations, like you were just saying, and learning to say no and setting healthy boundaries. That's what it sounds like. That's pretty fabulous.
Thank you. Yeah, it's still a daily struggle,
Sure.
but I feel like I'm stronger and able to do that more today than I've ever been. And am just very humbled and grateful that I have found myself working hard, being committed and dedicated, and just to have the opportunity to have other people believe in the vision and mission that was created in the organization I founded. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I never
Mm-hmm.
imagined that I would ever be able to see myself in that position just 10 years ago.
Sure. And it sounds so fascinating. And before we get into talking about the organization, I actually want to talk a little bit about, and I'm really curious if you can share. I mean, we've started to tease it out, we've started to talk about it. We've had some moments where we've started to talk about how your untold story has affected your mental health. Can you say a little bit more? Like, we've talked about the physical neglect, just all of the different parts of abuse that you had gone through, unfortunate complex traumas that you faced, and your suicide attempt, that was a pivotal moment for you in thinking like, okay, this is what's happening in life. And even beyond that, trying your best to cope and leaning on addictions that you didn't think that were going to be part of your life. How would you say your mental health was affected? Can you talk a little bit more about the emotions, or a little bit about the addictions, or maybe even what getting help looked like for you?
Yeah, I can start with the mental health piece. So
Mm-hmm.
at 14, I was diagnosed with having manic depressive disorder, which later became known as bipolar 1.
Mm-hmm.
And so that for me was very stigmatizing, that I had this label placed on me and I wasn't willing to accept that.
Mm-hmm.
And until I was willing to actually accept that I had a mental health diagnosis or struggle, I wasn't willing to get help because I wasn't willing to see that there was an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I found myself in a vicious cycle of just staying depressed and staying down and out. And eventually, after I attempted suicide, my father then realized there was a big problem and got me counseling and helped me get into various programs and things. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm very grateful that my dad was able to see that there was an issue and, take the lead and take charge in that regard.
So, when you were introduced to counseling and the programs that your father put you in, were you engaging in them? Like, did you find them helpful? Were you making progress? Were you able to make any connections?
So for me, I wanted help, but I didn't know how to put in the work to do it. And so though I tried to engage with the therapist and things, it's one of those things that you have to practice it daily. And
Mm-hmm.
I think just between my age and everything else, I don't feel like I was fully engaged in my treatment.
Mm-hmm.
But that's changed now. And I feel like I'm at a much different place. But going back to talking about addictions and things, that was another time that just spiraled and felt like a never ending cycle, until I finally just one day said, enough is enough. I am not living like this anymore. And then one day turned into two, turned into three. And then before you know it, years are going by that you're actually living that way. And for me, it's just been really, when these life struggles come up, just really sitting with my feelings in the
Mm-hmm.
moment,
Mm-hmm.
understanding that those feelings are temporary, and trying to tell myself over and over, even when it seems like there's no way around it, out of it, no other
Mm-hmm.
way to deal with it than to just sit and cry. I
Mm-hmm.
have to do my best to remind myself that it's temporary. And if
Mm-hmm.
I can't change it, then just do everything I can to be an active part in helping it.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that would be my father was diagnosed with cancer back in 2019 for the second
Okay.
time.
Wow. Okay.
And though that's been very devastating to me,
Mm-hmm.
especially after having lost my mentor and supervisor also to cancer earlier this year,
Mm-hmm.
it's been very hard mentally, and it's taken a physical toll at times, even on me, just being tired and exhausted
Mm-hmm.
from wanting to help, trying to help, and just it being on my mind so much.
Right.
But I was
Right.
finally able to tell myself, okay, I have to set healthy boundaries. And when my dad needs me, he will ask for my help. Of course, I will take initiative to be there for him, but I can't assume the whole diagnosis on myself. And I can support him, I can be there and love him and show compassion and care, but I'm not a doctor and I can't fix it. So
Mm.
all I can do is encourage him to get the treatment that he feels is the right decision for him, and be okay with whatever it is he decides, whether it's what I agree with or not.
Right. So, really learning what your role is, and when you're being an active part, just because you can't be the doctor, and you don't have to take on being the doctor, but you can still participate, you can still support, and you can remind yourself, like, this is what my role is. And if there's more that's asked of me, then I still get the chance to say yes or no or offer what I can. And so that's how you stay engaged.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's a really important message that you're providing in this space here. And in fact, I'm curious if you'd like to share a little bit more about what is your key message to the listeners of our show? What do you want them to know?
So I just want individuals to know that sometimes in life, those of us that struggle with mental health struggles and addiction struggles and things, please try to remember that even though oftentimes in society we get labeled as an addict or as a crazy person. I've heard a lot of different things said about
Mhm.
people in my situation. And my hope for people is that you know and realize that you are a person that struggles with an issue, but it does not have to define who you are.
Mhm. You're a person who struggles, but it doesn't become you.
Right.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
know for me, it was so easy to get caught up in allowing the diagnosis to identify me instead of standing up, even to just for myself in my own mind, standing up to myself and saying, Candace, no, this doesn't define who you are. It's
Mhm.
one struggle that you have in your life, but
Mhm.
it doesn't make you who you are today.
Mhm.
What are you doing to continue to do the next right thing?
Mhm.
And for me, that's getting up and continuing to try my best every day.
Right. And so, what would you say to those people who are really having feelings of hopelessness and helplessness and shame? What do you want them to know?
There are people that can relate to you. There are people that care about you, and there are resources out there to help you. And I encourage everyone, if you don't know or have resources, you are welcome to contact me. There's also the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and there are mental health organizations all over our country. And our nationwide 988 is launching very, very soon. So if you don't have other resources, please check out 988.
All right. That's a really great message. Thank you so much. So, Candace, I'm also curious about what would you say was really pivotal and game changing for you in terms of inspiration? So, when we think about inspiration, what was that game changing inspiration that's close to you that really reflects your untold story? So, what I mean by that is, would there have been a mantra or a book or a quote or an event, a speaker, a person, anything that speaks to you that you can share?
I would say Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score book was very impactful for me. And some of Brene Brown's work, I've read some of her books, and those two were impactful.
The Body Keeps the Score is a great book. They also have a workbook for people as well.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
I've worked through that as well. And that is a great resource for individuals. I feel like having been someone who's used it, it was very helpful for me as well.
That's awesome. All right. So, what is a cause or an organization that has been impactful to you on your journey that you would like to give a shout out to? Who would that be?
That would be I Care Aware. That's home of the International Association of Professional Recovery Coaches. I took their course and became a recovery coach. And I believe for me, that was, the beginning of my journey to really be able to help people. I participated in some peer-to-peer coaching, and it was very impactful having the open-ended questions given to me as a coachee, and just really resonated with me as a modality that I would like to know more about. And so I went on to get my recovery coaching credential through them. And I really appreciate all they're doing to educate people around addiction and recovery.
That sounds pretty awesome. Remind me again, what are they called?
It is I Care Aware.
I Care Aware.
And the organization for recovery coaches that they have is the International Association of Professional Recovery Coaches.
I see. That's awesome. That sounds like really good resources for people to tap into. And it's nice to hear how the programs and how those resources have resonated for you and what you've been able to take away from it. Any final notes on what you're grateful for about having gone through this journey?
I'm just grateful for all the people that I've met along my journey and that continue to be a part of my life, and those that maybe aren't an active part of my life, just everybody that's had a part in helping me in my journey to where I am today. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you. And I look forward to meeting lots of other people on my journey.
That's awesome. Okay. So, how can people connect with you if they would like to? What are the ways for you to be reached?
I have a website. I have a LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Oh, you're everywhere. You are everywhere. Okay, we're going to grab those from you, and that will be part of your show notes page so that anyone who wants to connect with you, learn more about you, follow you, get resources, whatever it may be, touch base, tell their story, whatever it may be, they can reach out to you. So that's awesome. Amazing. So, Candace, guess what?
What is that?
You've just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Candace, it really has been a riveting experience for me to hear such depths of your story, diving to the deep roots of the abuse that you endured, the dysfunction that you experienced with your family and your upbringing, and even the deep desire to end your life at age 14 and all the abuse that came after that, all the different traumas and complexities that you dealt with afterwards, even having a stillborn and the spiral that you went down, and also particularly how you were able to detail how your mental health was impacted throughout the journey. This story, Candace, was a brave telling, and I know it can only spark inspiration hope and new perspectives to our listeners. So thank you for your deep conversation and for all of the daring and sharing.
And thank you for what you're doing to share these stories and to help others.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I hope that we can just continue to spread the word and encourage others to hop on the show and tell their story of their own. So that's what I'm hoping to do. Let's just keep that mission going, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And once again, Candace, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.